We all talk about happiness. We all want it. But what is it, really? For something so central to our lives, it's an incredibly slippery idea. So, how did some of the greatest minds in history try to pin it down? Well, that's what we're going to get into right now. So, let's just start with the biggest question of all. I want you to ask yourself right now, are you happy? It sounds so simple, but for most of us, a question like that, it can make you feel a little uneasy, can it? So why is that? Well, that discomfort, that little squirm in your seat, it usually comes from two places. First off, it's pretty hard to answer if you don't even have a clear personal definition of what happiness is supposed to be. And second, there's this huge, unspoken social pressure, this expectation that you're supposed to be happy, which can make you feel like you're failing if you're not totally sure. Now, what's so fascinating is that the ancient Greek philosophers, instead of running away from this discomfort, they leaned right into it. They took this really personal, kind of awkward question and turned it into the starting point for a massive investigation. They shifted the focus from the world out there to the world in here. And this entire idea was perfectly captured by the inscription at the Temple of Apollo, Know Thyself. For thinkers like Socrates, this was everything. It was the main mission. Before you can even begin to understand happiness or how to live a good life, you have to first understand the self that's actually doing the living. All right, so let's bring in our first major guide on this quest, Aristotle. He took this idea of self-knowledge and built this whole logical framework for achieving happiness, all through what he called self-realization. See, for Aristotle, happiness wasn't just a pleasant feeling. He had a very specific word for it, eudaimonia. Now, that's often translated as flourishing or living well. And this was the ultimate goal, the most desirable thing of all. He really saw it as fulfilling our potential as human beings, achieving a complete sense of self-realization. And the key to all of this was living a life of virtue. But virtue for Aristotle didn't just mean being a good person in a moral sense. His definition was much broader. Virtue meant the full realization of a thing's potential, its excellence. Think about it. A virtuous knife is a sharp one because its whole purpose is to cut well. So what makes a human virtuous? And here's his logic broken down. First, he asked, what is our unique potential? He identified our capacity to reason as the thing that sets us apart. So second, what's the path? He argued that living virtuously means developing and perfecting that rationality, which, of course, leads to the goal. A life guided by reason is a virtuous life. And for Aristotle, a virtuous life is a happy life. It all connects. Okay, so Aristotle's path of reason is a powerful, powerful ideal. But what about the messy, unpredictable reality of everyday life? I mean, how do we apply these big ideas when things just don't go our way? This is where other schools of thought, like the Stoics and the Epicureans, came in with some incredibly practical, hands-on advice. For these thinkers, happiness wasn't some spontaneous thing that just happened to you. It wasn't a lucky break. Not at all. It was a skill, something to be actively worked on day in and day out by changing how we choose to respond to the world around us. And a core practice, especially for the Stoics, was this idea of adjusting our expectations. It's about drawing a really clear line in the sand between what we can control and what we can't. So we have power over our own thoughts, our priorities, our actions. But we have zero direct control over external stuff like other people or the economy. The truly wise approach, they said, is to focus all our energy only on the things we can actually change. Epicurus just captured this so perfectly. He said, we must never forget that the future is neither wholly ours nor wholly not ours. He's reminding us that the future is always going to be a mix of what we do and what just happens. So we shouldn't expect it to go exactly our way, but we also shouldn't fall into despair thinking we have no say at all. It's all about finding that rational, balanced middle ground. So when you start to put these ideas together, you arrive at this much bigger, more durable vision of happiness, one that sees it as an ongoing journey, something way more substantial than just a string of happy moments. And a lot of these philosophers were really clear on this point. A truly happy life has weight. It has substance. It can't just be defined by adding up a bunch of fleeting, joyful moments, no matter how many you have. It's about the overall character and quality of your life as a whole. And here's another piece of brilliant wisdom from Epicurus on how to cultivate that substance in your life. He says we should stop and think about the fact that the things we have right now, our health, our friends, our home, were very often the things we once desperately hoped for. It's such a powerful call for gratitude over just wanting the next thing. But of course, like any deep dive into philosophy, answering one question just opens up a bunch of new ones. If a happy life is more than just pleasure, well, does that mean sadness has a role to play? Does feeling sorrow actually give more meaning to our joy? And is happiness some kind of destination we're supposed to finally arrive at? And this leads us to our final big idea to chew on. Maybe happiness isn't the prize you get at the end of the journey. Maybe the journey itself, the act of questioning, of learning, of exercising that uniquely human ability to reason, is an essential, integral part of what it means to live a happy life. What do you think?